The notification chimed on my phone at exactly 6:47 p.m., just as I was pulling into our driveway after another soul-crushing day debugging code at the software company. Mila's message glowed on the screen. "Staying at Mom's tonight. She needs my help with something urgent. Don't wait up. Love you." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at those words, feeling something cold settle in my stomach. Alex Marsh, 38 years old, mechanical engineer turned software developer, and apparently the world's most gullible husband. This was the fourth mom emergency this month, and it was only the 15th. See, here's the thing about being married to someone for 8 years. You start noticing patterns. Like how Mila's emergencies always seemed to coincide with her working late at the real estate office, or how she'd started buying new lingerie but never wore it at home, or how she'd suddenly become very interested in girls' nights that required hotel stays. But the biggest red flag? Her mother, Dorothy, lived in a senior community in Florida, had been there for 3 years now, happy as a clam, playing bridge and complaining about the cafeteria food. I sat in my truck for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, and made a decision that would change everything. Instead of my usual routine of microwaving leftover pizza and pretending everything was fine, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. "Dorothy, hi, it's Alex. Yeah, Mila's husband. Listen, I know this might sound weird, but Mila said you needed help with something urgent tonight. Is everything okay?" The pause that followed was longer than a Stephen King novel. "Alex, honey, I'm fine. I'm actually at my book club right now. We're discussing Gone Girl. Quite fitting, don't you think? I haven't talked to Mila in over a week." That cold feeling in my stomach turned into a full-blown Arctic blast. "Dorothy, would you mind doing me a favor? Could you drive over to our house? I think we need to have a conversation." "Oh my," Dorothy said, and I could practically hear the wheels turning in her 72-year-old head. "Oh, Alex, I'll be right there." While I waited for Dorothy, I did what any self-respecting husband would do in 2024. I checked our joint bank account. There it was, glowing like a neon sign in Vegas. A charge to the Riverside Inn for $127.50, posted at 4:30 p.m. today. The same motel where we'd had our first date 9 years ago. How romantic. I also noticed something else interesting. 3 charges to Jake's Auto Emporium over the past month. Jake Holloway, Mila's ex-boyfriend from college. The same Jake who'd made it clear at our wedding that he thought Mila was settling for me. The same Jake who owned the biggest car dealership in town and never let anyone forget it. My phone buzzed with a text from Mila. "Mom's really upset. Might be here all night. Sorry, baby." I actually laughed out loud. Here I was, sitting in my driveway, waiting for her upset mother to arrive and blow her story to smithereens. If Mila wanted to play games, I was about to show her I'd been studying the rulebook. Dorothy arrived 20 minutes later, driving her pristine 2019 Honda Civic like she was qualifying for NASCAR. She marched up to my front door with the determination of a woman who'd raised 3 kids and buried 2 husbands. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her lipstick was combat-ready, and her eyes held the kind of fire that made me remember where Mila got her stubborn streak. "All right, Alex," she said, settling into our living room like she was preparing for war. "Tell me what that daughter of mine has done now." I showed her the text messages. I showed her the bank charges. I watched her face cycle through confusion, disappointment, and finally, a cold anger that reminded me exactly why I'd always been slightly afraid of my mother-in-law. "That little fool," Dorothy muttered. "Jake Holloway. Really? That pompous ass who tried to convince her to drop out of college and be his trophy wife?" "The very same," I confirmed. Dorothy pulled out her phone with the efficiency of a gunslinger. "What's his number?" "Dorothy, what are you—" But she was already dialing. I could hear the phone ringing through the speaker. "Jake, this is Dorothy, Mila's mother. Yes, I know it's been a while. Listen, I need you to put my daughter on the phone right now." The silence that followed was deafening. Then I heard Jake's voice, muffled and panicked. "Mrs. Patterson, I don't know what you're talking about. Mila's not—" "Cut the crap, Jake. I know she's there, and I know what you two have been up to. Put her on the phone or I'm calling her husband right now and telling him exactly where to find you." More muffled sounds, then Mila's voice came through the speaker, tight with panic. "Mom, what are you doing? How did you—" Dorothy looked at me and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Honey, I'm sitting in your living room with Alex. We've been having the most interesting conversation about your recent hotel expenses." The sound that came through the phone could only be described as a human implosion. "Mom, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can," Dorothy said sweetly. But I think you should save your explanations for your husband. Alex, would you like to say hello to your wife? I took the phone, and for the first time in months, I felt completely in control. Hi, sweetheart. How's your mom doing? She seems pretty healthy to me. Alex, please, this isn't what it looks like. Really, because it looks like you're at the Riverside Inn with your ex-boyfriend, lying to your husband about where you are. But hey, maybe I'm just seeing things. The line went dead. Dorothy and I sat in silence for a moment. Then she patted my knee with surprising gentleness. Alex, honey, what are you going to do? I looked around our living room, at the photos of our wedding, at the furniture we'd picked out together, at the life we'd built that was apparently all a lie. Then I looked at Dorothy, this fierce woman who'd just blown up her own daughter's deception to help me find the truth. I'm going to play their game, I said, but I'm going to play it better. My phone started buzzing with frantic text from Mila. Apologies, excuses, promises that this was the first time, that it didn't mean anything, that she loved me and we could work this out. I turned the phone off. Dorothy, I said, how would you like to help me teach your daughter a lesson about honesty? She grinned, and suddenly I understood exactly where Mila had inherited her capacity for strategic thinking. The difference was, Dorothy used her powers for good. Alex, dear, she said, I thought you'd never ask. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Not because I was actually sick, but because I had planning to do. Mila had come home around midnight, tears streaming, apologies flowing, swearing it was a mistake and would never happen again. I'd listened with the patience of a saint and the expression of a poker player. We'll talk about it later, I'd told her. I need time to process this. She'd spent the night on the couch, which was fine by me. I'd spent it staring at the ceiling, formulating a plan that would have made Sun Tzu proud. First stop, Pete's Auto Repair, where my best friend since high school spent his days elbow-deep in engine grease and dispensing wisdom like a blue-collar philosopher. Pete Martinez looked up from under the hood of a 2015 Chevy when I walked in, his weathered face breaking into the kind of grin that had gotten us both in trouble back in the day. Alex, what brings you to my palace of broken dreams and overpriced parts? I need advice, I said, and maybe some help with a project. So Pete wiped his hands on a rag that had seen better decades and gestured to his office, a cramped space that smelled like coffee and motor oil. The walls were covered with calendars from parts suppliers, none of them from the current year, and a sign that read, Labor, 100 hour. If you watch, 150 hour. If you help, 200 hour. All right, brother, lay it on me, Pete said, settling into a chair that creaked ominously. I told him everything, the lies, the hotel charges, Jake Holloway, Dorothy's surprise visit. Pete listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. That son of a bitch, he finally said. Jake Holloway? You know, he brought his Porsche in here last month, acting like he was doing me a favor by letting me change his oil. Treated my guys like servants. What kind of car does he drive now? Brand new 911, silver. License plate says Dealer 1. Real subtle, right? Pete shook his head. So what's the plan, Alex? Please tell me we're not just going to sit around and feel sorry for ourselves. Oh, we're not sitting around, I assured him. But we're going to be smart about this. No criminal damage, nothing that can come back to bite us legally. Just creative problem solving. Pete's grin returned. I like the sound of that. What do you need? Information, mostly. I want to know Jake's patterns. Where he goes, when he goes there, who he talks to, and I want to know about Mila's schedule, the real one, not the one she's been giving me. Consider it done. My cousin Maria works at the bank. She might have some insights about their financial activities. And my nephew Danny does food delivery all over town. Kid sees everything. We spent the next hour planning what Pete called Operation Humble Pie. Nothing illegal, nothing violent, just a systematic campaign to expose the truth and let natural consequences do the rest. You know what the best part about this is? Pete said as I prepared to leave. Jake's the kind of guy who thinks he's untouchable. Those are always the easiest ones to knock down. I was halfway to my truck when Pete called out, Hey, Alex. One more thing. That Porsche of his, it's got custom rims, $2,200 each. Would be a real shame if someone let the air out of his tires in a place where he couldn't call for help right away. Pete, I said solemnly, I have no idea what you're talking about. Course you don't, he grinned. See you tonight. I spent the rest of the morning at the public library, using their computers to do research. Jake's dealership had a website with staff photos and a detailed About the Owner section that made my teeth hurt. According to his bio, Jake was a pillar of the community and a devoted family man who was committed to serving his neighbors with integrity and honesty. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a wrench. I also looked up the Riverside Inn's location and layout. It was on the edge of town, surrounded by woods, with only one main access road. The parking lot had no security cameras, and the nearest businesses closed at 6 p.m. Perfect for privacy, terrible for quick escapes. By the time I got home, Mila was in full damage control mode. She'd cleaned the entire house, cooked my favorite meal, and was wearing the red dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. She looked beautiful, remorseful, and completely terrified. "Alex, we need to talk," she said as soon as I walked in. "Yes, we do," I agreed. "But first, I have a question. How long has this been going on?" She looked like I'd slapped her. This was the first time anything actually happened. "Mila, I've seen the bank records. 3 visits to Jake's dealership in the past month, late-night work meetings that coincidentally happen when I'm out of town, change passwords on your phone and email, so I'll ask again. How long?" She sat down heavily on the couch, her carefully constructed facade crumbling. 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. It started as just talking. He reached out on Facebook, said he was going through a divorce, needed someone to talk to. And you thought, perfect. My husband's best emotional support would be my ex-boyfriend? It wasn't like that, she protested. At first, it really was just talking. But then you decided to upgrade from emotional cheating to the full package? She started crying then, and part of me, the part that had loved her for 9 years, wanted to comfort her. But a bigger part, the part that had been lied to and betrayed and made to feel crazy for suspecting the truth, stayed right where it was. "Alex, please. I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this together." "Can we?" I asked. "Because here's what I'm wondering, Mila. If your mom hadn't called you out last night, how long would this have gone on? Another month? Another year? Were you ever going to tell me, or were you just going to keep lying until I figured it out on my own?" She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. "I need time to think," I told her. "I'm going to stay at Pete's tonight. We'll talk more tomorrow." "Alex, don't do this. Don't give up on us." I paused at the door and looked back at her. She looked small and broken and sorry, and for just a moment I almost wavered. Then I remembered the hotel charge, the lies, the way she'd looked me in the eye that morning and asked if I wanted her to pick up dinner on her way home from her client meeting. "Mila," I said quietly, "you gave up on us the first time you texted Jake back." I drove to Pete's house with my phone buzzing constantly. Texts from Mila, missed calls, voicemails I didn't listen to. I turned the phone off and helped Pete work on his project car, a 1967 Camaro that he'd been restoring for the better part of a decade. "You know what's funny?" I said, sanding rust off a door panel. "I actually thought about proposing to her at the Riverside Inn. That's where we had our first date." "And now she's screwing her ex there," Pete observed. "That's some next-level psychological warfare right there." "Yeah, well, 2 can play that game." Pete looked up from the carburetor he was rebuilding. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," I said, "that it's time Jake Holloway learned that some people's wives aren't as available as he thinks they are." "And how exactly are we going to teach him that lesson?" I smiled, and it felt good to smile with genuine anticipation for the first time in weeks. Leave that to me. The next evening, I put my plan into motion. I'd spent the day crafting the perfect text message to Mila, one that would sound like reconciliation but was actually bait for a trap. "I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe we should talk tonight. Can you meet me at our place, you know where I mean, around 8 p.m.? I want to try to work this out." Her response came back in less than 30 seconds. "Yes. Oh, Alex, thank you. I'll be there. I love you so much." What she didn't know was that our place could mean several things. To her, it probably meant the Riverside Inn, where we'd had our first date and where she'd been meeting Jake. To me, it meant the little coffee shop downtown where we'd had our first real conversation about the future. I'd be at the coffee shop, she'd be at the motel. And Jake was about to get a very interesting surprise. At 7:30 p.m., I called the Riverside Inn from a payphone outside the grocery store. Yes, payphones still exist, and they're remarkably useful when you don't want a call traced back to your cell number. "Riverside Inn, this is Brenda." "Hi, I need to leave a message for Jake Holloway. He's in room, I let my voice trail off uncertainly. "Room 237, Brenda supplied helpfully. "Would you like me to connect you?" "No, just a message, please. Tell him his wife called and she's on her way over. She knows about the affair and she's bringing her lawyer." "Oh my," Brenda said. I'll make sure he gets the message right away." "Thanks. Oh, and Brenda, you might want to have security ready. She seemed pretty upset. I hung up and drove to the coffee shop, where I ordered a large coffee and settled in to wait. At exactly 8:15, my phone rang. "Alex, where are you?" Mila's voice was tight with confusion and growing panic. "I'm at our place, just like we agreed. Where are you?" I thought you meant..." She was clearly trying to figure out how to explain why she was at a motel instead of somewhere innocent. "Mila, are you at the Riverside Inn?" Silence. "Because if you are, that's interesting. I'm sitting at Grounded Coffee, where we used to study together when we were dating. You know, our actual place." More silence, then. "Alex, I can explain." "I'm sure you can. But first, let me ask you something. Is Jake there with you?" "No. He left about 20 minutes ago. He got some weird message about his wife coming over, and he just took off." I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. "His wife? But isn't he divorced?" The divorce isn't final yet. Alex, please, can we just meet somewhere and talk? This is all a misunderstanding." "You're right," I said. "It is a misunderstanding. I misunderstood who I was married to." I hung up and drove home, where I found exactly what I expected. Mila's car in the driveway and every light in the house blazing. She met me at the door, still in the dress she'd worn to meet her lover, her makeup smeared and her hands shaking. "Alex, thank God you're here. We need to talk about this rationally." "Rationally," I repeated. "Okay, let's be rational. Rationally speaking, you just spent the evening at a motel with your ex-boyfriend. Rationally speaking, you lied to me about where you were going. Rationally speaking, when I asked you to meet me to work things out, you assumed I meant the place where you've been cheating on me." "It's not what you think. Mila, stop. Just stop." I sat down heavily in my recliner, suddenly feeling exhausted. "Do you want to know what I think? I think you're sorry you got caught. I think you're scared about what this means for your comfortable life. But I don't think you're actually sorry about what you did." "That's not true, isn't it? Because if you were really sorry, if you really wanted to work this out, you would have come clean weeks ago. You would have ended things with Jake. You wouldn't have lied to my face this morning when you kissed me goodbye and told me you loved me." She started crying again, but this time it felt calculated, performative. "Alex, I do love you. I made a mistake, but it doesn't change how I feel about you." "You know what, Mila? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you do love me, in your way. But you also love the excitement of sneaking around. You love the drama of having two men fighting over you. You love feeling desired and special and like you're the star of your own romantic movie." Her tears stopped abruptly. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I stood up, and for the first time since this whole mess started, I let my anger show. "You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been talking to me when you started feeling disconnected from our marriage. Fair would have been couples therapy before you started texting your ex. Fair would have been honesty instead of lies, communication instead of deception. I tried to talk to you. You're always working, always distracted. So that makes it my fault?" "No, but nothing, Mila. You made a choice. Actually, you made dozens of choices. Every text you sent, every lie you told, every time you looked me in the eye and pretended everything was fine while you were planning your next hotel room rendezvous." I walked to the window and looked out at our neighborhood, at the life we'd built together that was now irreparably broken. "You know what the worst part is? It's not even the cheating. It's the lying. It's the way you made me feel crazy for suspecting something was wrong. It's the way you gaslit me into thinking I was being paranoid and controlling when my gut was telling me the truth." "Alex, please." I turned back to her, and she must have seen something in my expression that scared her, because she took a step back. "Here's what's going to happen," I said calmly. "Tomorrow you're going to call Jake and tell him this is over. Completely over. No more texts, no more calls, no more business meetings at his dealership." "Okay, yes, I can do that. I'm not finished. You're also going to write a letter to his wife, his actual wife, who apparently doesn't know about his extracurricular activities, and tell her exactly what's been going on." "Alex, I can't do that. It would ruin his marriage. His marriage was ruined the minute he decided to cheat on his wife, just like ours was ruined the minute you decided to cheat on me." She stared at me, finally beginning to understand that this wasn't going to be as easy as she'd hoped. "And if I do all that, if I cut contact with Jake and tell his wife, will you forgive me? Can we try to work this out?" I looked at this woman I'd loved for 9 years, this stranger who'd been living in my house and sharing my bed while lying to my face, and felt something inside me finally break free. "Mila," I said quietly, "I don't know if I can ever trust you again, but I know I can't trust you right now. So we're going to find out exactly how sorry you really are, and exactly how much our marriage actually means to you. What does that mean? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. It means, sweetheart, that the games are just getting started. The next morning, I woke up to find Mila already gone. She'd left a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to handle things with Jake. We'll call his wife today. Please don't give up on us. M. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Then I called Pete. How'd it go last night? He asked. Phase 1 complete. Jake got spooked by a fake message about his wife showing up, and Mila got caught in another lie. She's supposedly ending things with him today. You don't sound convinced. That's because I'm not. She's in damage control mode, trying to minimize the fallout. But she's not actually sorry. She's just sorry she got caught. So what's phase 2? I looked out the window at our perfectly manicured suburban street, where everyone pretended their lives were as neat and tidy as their lawns. Phase 2 is letting the community know exactly who they're dealing with. I like the sound of that. What do you need? Remember your cousin Maria at the bank. I need to know about any joint accounts Jake might have with his wife, any large withdrawals or deposits, anything that might indicate he's been spending marital assets on his affair. And if he has been? Then his wife deserves to know about it before their divorce is finalized. Pete was quiet for a moment. Alex, you sure you want to go down this road? Once you start this kind of war, there's no going back. Pete, they started this war when they decided to blow up my marriage. I'm just finishing it. After I hung up with Pete, I did something I'd never done before. I called in sick to work for the second day in a row and spent the morning doing reconnaissance. Jake's dealership was on the main strip, a gleaming monument to his ego with his name in letters 3 feet tall. I parked across the street and watched the morning routine. Jake arrived at 9:30 in his silver Porsche, spent 10 minutes adjusting his tie in the reflection of the showroom windows, and then strutted inside like he owned the world. At 10:15, Mila's car pulled into the lot. I'd been expecting this, but seeing it still hit me like a punch to the gut. She was supposed to be ending things with him, but instead of a quick phone call, she'd driven across town for an in-person meeting. They were either having the world's most elaborate breakup, or she was lying to me again. I didn't have to wait long to find out which. Through the dealership's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see them in Jake's office. They weren't sitting across from each other like two people having a difficult conversation about ending an affair. They were sitting close together, Mila's hand on Jake's arm, both of them gesturing animatedly like they were planning something. I took photos with my phone, not for any legal purpose. Maine is a no-fault divorce state, but because I wanted documentation of just how little my wife's promises were worth. At 11:30, they left the office together and got into Jake's Porsche. I followed them, staying far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to see where they were going. They went to the Riverside Inn. I sat in my truck in the parking lot of a closed gas station across from the motel and watched my wife of 8 years walk into a room with another man, less than 12 hours after swearing to me that she was ending their affair. That's when something inside me finally snapped. Not into rage, I was past rage, into something colder and more calculating. If Mila wanted to play games, I was going to show her what a real player looked like. I drove home and spent the afternoon making phone calls. First, I called Jake's dealership and asked to speak to the owner about a complaint. "I'm sorry, Mr. Holloway is in a meeting," his secretary said. "That's fine. I'll hold." "Actually, he's going to be tied up for several hours. Can I take a message?" "Sure. Tell him Alex Marsh called about his customer service. He'll know what I mean." Next, I called the Riverside Inn. "Hi, this is Detective Johnson with the State Police," I said, deepening my voice and adding an official tone. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in your parking lot. Has anyone on your staff noticed anything unusual today?" "Oh my goodness," Brenda said. "What kind of suspicious activity?" "We're investigating reports of insurance fraud involving staged accidents in motel parking lots. Have you noticed any vehicles that seem to be casing the area, or any guests who are meeting people they don't seem to know well?" "Well, there is this one couple. They've been coming here for a few weeks now, always pay cash, always seem very nervous. Can you describe them?" Brenda proceeded to give me detailed descriptions of Mila and Jake, including their license plate numbers and the fact that they always requested the same room. "Thank you, ma'am. We may need to follow up with you later. In the meantime, if you see them again, please give us a call immediately." "Of course, officer. Should I be worried about my other guests' safety?" "Just keep an eye out for anything unusual. These fraud rings can sometimes escalate to more serious crimes." I hung up, feeling only slightly guilty about impersonating a police officer. Technically, I hadn't actually claimed to be a cop. I just let Brenda assume that's what Detective Johnson meant. My final call was to Pete. "How'd you like to help me with a little community service project?" I asked. "What kind of community service?" The kind that helps people make informed decisions about who they do business with. Pete was quiet for a moment, then chuckled. Brother, you are starting to scare me, and I like it. That evening, Mila came home with red eyes and a story about how difficult it had been to break things off with Jake. He didn't take it well, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. He got angry, said some horrible things, but it's over, Alex. It's really over. I'm glad to hear that, I said. It must have been a very long conversation. You were gone for over 4 hours. We had a lot to talk through. There were complications. What kind of complications? She fidgeted with her wedding ring, spinning it around her finger like she always did when she was lying. He said he was going to tell you about us himself if I didn't. I had to convince him that it would just make things worse for everyone. And did you? Convince him, I mean? I think so. Alex, I know this is hard, but I need you to trust me. I'm handling this the best way I know how. I nodded sympathetically. I do trust you, sweetheart. In fact, I trust you so much that I'm sure you won't mind if I call Jake myself, just to make sure we're all on the same page. The color drained from her face. Alex, no, that's not a good idea. He's still angry, and if you call him, then he'll what? Tell me about the affair I already know about? Threaten to ruin our marriage that's already in shambles? He might say things that aren't true, just to hurt you. What kind of things, Mila? She was trapped, and we both knew it. If she told me not to call Jake because he might lie about ending the affair, she was admitting the affair wasn't actually over. If she encouraged me to call him, she was risking me finding out that they'd spent the afternoon in a motel room instead of breaking up. I think it's better if we handle this ourselves, without involving him anymore. You're probably right, I agreed. After all, why would I want to talk to the man who's been sleeping with my wife? That would just be awkward for everyone. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but I wasn't done. Although, now that I think about it, I should probably send him a thank you card. A thank you card? Sure. After all, he's helped me see exactly who I'm married to. That's the kind of gift that keeps on giving. Mila started crying again, but this time I didn't feel even a flicker of sympathy. I was done being manipulated by her tears. Alex, please. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to fix them. Can't you see that I'm trying? What I see, I said, standing up and looking down at her, is a woman who thinks she can lie her way out of the consequences of her choices. What I see is someone who's more concerned about managing the narrative than actually changing her behavior. That's not true, isn't it? Because here's what I think happened today, Mila. I think you went to Jake's dealership to figure out how to handle me, not how to end your affair. I think you spent 4 hours trying to coordinate your stories, not saying goodbye. And I think you're sitting here right now, spinning your wedding ring and lying to my face, just like you have been for the past 2 months. She stopped crying abruptly and looked up at me with something that might have been fear, or might have been calculation. Alex, you're scaring me. This isn't like you. You're right, I said. The old Alex would have believed your lies and tried to fix a marriage that you've already destroyed. But that Alex was an idiot. The new Alex is a lot smarter. What does that mean? I smiled, and this time I didn't try to make it nice. It means, sweetheart, that you're about to find out what happens when you play games with someone who's better at them than you are. 3 days later, everything came together like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of destruction. Pete's cousin Maria had come through with information that was better than I'd hoped. Jake hadn't just been spending his own money on the affair. He'd been dipping into joint accounts that belonged to him and his soon-to-be ex-wife. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, jewelry that I'd never seen Mila wear. Over $6,000 in the past 2 months, all of it technically marital property. Pete's nephew Danny had provided surveillance that confirmed what I already suspected. Mila and Jake were still meeting regularly, despite her tearful promises to end things. They'd just gotten more creative about their locations, rotating between different motels and even meeting at a cabin Jake owned outside town. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Henderson, our 70-year-old neighbor who spent her retirement years monitoring the neighborhood with the dedication of a CIA operative. Alex, dear, she'd said when she cornered me while I was getting my mail, I hope you don't mind me asking, but is everything all right between you and Mila? Why do you ask, Mrs. Henderson? Well, it's just that I've noticed some unusual activity. That man with the silver sports car has been picking her up several times when you're at work, and yesterday I saw her loading suitcases into her car. Suitcases. Mila was planning to leave, but she hadn't said a word to me about it. That evening, I confronted her directly. Going somewhere? I asked, gesturing to the suitcase I'd found hidden in our bedroom closet. She had the grace to look embarrassed, but not the decency to look ashamed. Alex, I was going to tell you. I think I think maybe we need some time apart, just to figure things out. Time apart? With Jake? It's not about Jake. Mila, stop. Just stop lying to me. I know you're still seeing him. I know you've been planning this for days. I know about the cabin, the different motels, all of it. Her mask finally slipped completely. Fine. Yes, I'm leaving. Yes, I'm going to be with Jake. This marriage is over, Alex, and we both know it. You're right, I said calmly. It is over, but there's just one problem with your exit strategy. What's that? Jake's wife found out about the affair yesterday. She also found out about the $6,000 he spent on you using their joint accounts. Her divorce lawyer is very interested in both pieces of information. Mila went white. How do I know? Because I told her. I called Rebecca Holloway and had a very enlightening conversation about her husband's recent activities. Turns out she'd been suspicious for weeks, but couldn't prove anything. I was happy to help her connect the dots. You bastard, Mila whispered. Oh, I'm not done yet. See, Rebecca was so grateful for the information that she decided to share some things with me, like the fact that Jake's been telling you he's getting divorced, but he actually withdrew the papers 3 weeks ago. He was never planning to leave his wife for you, Mila. You were just a fun distraction while he worked through his midlife crisis. The look of devastation that crossed her face was almost satisfying enough to make up for 2 months of lies and betrayal. Almost. That's not true. Jake loves me. Jake said whatever he needed to say to keep you sleeping with him. But now that his wife knows, now that she's threatening to take him for everything he's worth in the divorce, guess who he's going to choose? As if on cue, Mila's phone buzzed with a text message. She looked at it, and I watched the last of her hope crumble. Let me guess, I said. Jake's having second thoughts about running away together? She didn't answer, but the tears streaming down her face told me everything I needed to know. Here's what's going to happen now, I continued. You're going to pack your things, all of them, and you're going to leave, tonight. You're going to stay at a hotel or with a friend or in your car, for all I care, but you're not staying here. Alex, please. I have nowhere to go. Jake says he needs time to think, and I don't have any money. Well, you should have thought of that before you decided to blow up our marriage for a man who was never going to choose you. I can't afford a hotel. I spent all my savings on what, Mila? On new lingerie for your boyfriend? On your share of those hotel rooms? On trying to turn yourself into the kind of woman you thought Jake wanted? She nodded miserably, and for a moment, just a moment, I felt a flicker of pity for her. Then I remembered the lies, the gaslighting, the way she'd made me feel crazy for trusting my instincts. The pity died. That's not my problem anymore, I said. You made your choices, and now you get to live with the consequences. What about our marriage? What about 8 years together? Doesn't that mean anything to you? I looked at this woman who had shared my bed and my dreams and my future, who had thrown it all away for a few months of excitement with a man who had never intended to leave his wife. It meant everything to me, I said quietly. But it didn't mean enough to you to keep you from destroying it. So no, Mila. Those 8 years don't mean anything anymore. You made sure of that. She packed her bags while I watched from the living room, making sure she didn't take anything that belonged to both of us. When she was done, she stood in our doorway with her suitcases, looking smaller and more lost than I'd ever seen her. Alex, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but... You're right, I interrupted. You don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not offering it. What am I supposed to do now? I shrugged. Figure it out. You're a smart woman, Mila. You managed to conduct a 2-month affair while living with your husband. I'm sure you can figure out how to find a place to sleep. She left without another word, and I watched through the window as she loaded her car and drove away. Her phone was pressed to her ear, probably calling Jake, begging him to reconsider, to choose her over his wife and his comfortable life. I knew he wouldn't. Men like Jake didn't leave their wives for their mistresses when the stakes got real. They cut their losses and went home to beg forgiveness from the women who held the keys to their financial kingdoms. The next morning, I called Pete to give him the update. It's done, I said. She's gone, Jake's crawling back to his wife, and I'm officially a free man. How do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. I felt tired, relieved, angry, sad, but mostly I felt like I'd finally stopped carrying a weight I didn't even realize had been crushing me. I feel like I can breathe again, I said finally. Any regrets? Just one, I admitted. I regret not trusting my instincts sooner. I knew something was wrong months ago, but I let her convince me I was being paranoid. Well, you won't make that mistake again. No, I agreed. I won't. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat on my front porch with a beer and watched the world go by. Mrs. Henderson waved from her garden, and I waved back. A couple of neighbors I barely knew stopped to chat, and I realized how isolated I'd become during the final months of my marriage, how much energy I'd been spending trying to hold together something that was already broken. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Alex, this is Rebecca Holloway. I wanted to thank you for telling me the truth about my husband's affair. My lawyer says the evidence you provided will be very helpful in our divorce proceedings. I hope you're doing well." I texted back, "I'm doing better every day. I hope you get everything you deserve in the divorce." Her response came quickly. "Oh, I will." Jake's about to learn that cheating on a woman who handles the books for his dealership was not his smartest move. I smiled and put my phone away. Jake was about to discover that actions have consequences, and Mila was about to learn that burning bridges leaves you with nowhere to go when you need help. As for me, I was about to learn what it felt like to be free. 6 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Mila had moved to Portland and was working as a waitress while trying to get her real estate license reinstated. Jake had lost his dealership in the divorce and was selling used cars for someone else's lot. They weren't together. Apparently, their great love affair hadn't survived the reality of being broke and homeless. I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, but no sympathy either. They had made their choices, and they were living with the consequences, just like I was living with mine. The difference was, my consequences included freedom, self-respect, and the knowledge that I would never again ignore my instincts for the sake of keeping the peace. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be destroyed by someone else's selfishness. And sometimes the best revenge is living well while they learn what it costs to throw away something real for something that was never going to last.